Hey guys, Jake from Michigan here. A quick video for you today. It's about 5 degrees outside right now and a little bit windy, so I'm not really sure how long I'll be able to make it out here. But I did want to make sure that I brought you guys a quick tip, something that you guys can be doing on your properties right now that will help you in the upcoming season. At least those of you guys that are in the northern part of the country. And that's that right now is a great time to scout your property, a great time to scout the deer sign on your property. And we'll dive into a few different reasons as to why I really like scouting my property this time of year. And the first reason that I really like scouting my property this time of year is because there is a 0% chance that I'm going to be bumping a buck off of my property, sending that deer to my neighbors to potentially get shot. Right now here in Michigan and throughout most of the northern half of the country, the hunting seasons are either over or they're winding down. So if you're scouting your properties right now, there is a very low chance that you're going to be kicking a deer off and having that deer get shot by your neighbors. I know that we still have some states that are still going strong. Lee, he's still hunting down in Tennessee. I think Josh, he's still waiting for the rut to show up down in Georgia. But up here in the northern part of the country, most of our hunting seasons are either done or they're almost done. So again, right now, if your hunting season is over, is a great time to get back on your property to scout that deer sign. Another reason that I really like scouting properties this time of year, immediately following the hunting season, is because a lot of that sign that you're finding is going to directly correlate with the previous hunting season. So a lot of the scrapes, the rubs, trails, beds, a lot of that sign can give you clues as to what those deer were doing during the previous hunting season. Now, depending on your property's location, the weather from year to year, what your property offers habitat-wise, the sign might not always reflect what those deer were doing in the fall. For example, if you have had a really cold winter so far and you're noticing that those deer are not in those fall bedding areas, really high stem count, a lot of early successional growth, and they're transitioning more to that thermal protection, that's just something that you want to make sure that you're taking into consideration. If you do have an area that the deer were using a lot in the fall, but you're not seeing a lot of activity there now, it might just be that the deer are transitioning into those winter areas. It's not that you have a bad fall bedding area, it's just that this winter is a little harsher and those deer are transitioning into those winter areas. But now is still a great time to scout your property. You can learn so much about how the deer are using the landscape, using your property, and how they were using it during the previous hunting season. And one thing that I really like doing when scouting my property, which is going to be the next tip, is if you can, wait for snow before you scout your property. So if you want to scout your property postseason and you see that there's snow in the forecast, let it snow and then maybe wait a week before going up to your property and taking a walk. And the reason why is most likely obvious, but I'm going to say it anyways, and that's that all of that deer sign, all of that deer activity that took place the last week is going to be frozen in time. You're going to be able to see everything that those deer did the last week on your property. And being able to see how these deer are moving through your property is so beneficial, especially for those of you guys that have a lower deer density. Those of you guys that have a really high deer density, those trails stand out like a sore thumb. You're not going to miss them. You can see them in the middle of July. But for those of you guys that have a lower deer density, it can be harder sometimes to see where that deer trail is. But after a fresh snowfall, you can see exactly how these deer are moving through your property and how they're using different parts of your property. And one thing that I really like to do this time of year with the help of the snow is track individual deer back to their beds. And so what I do is I start at a late season food source, the food source that these deer are traveling to in the evening, and I try to find the biggest track in that food plot or food source. And that doesn't always mean that that track's going to be a buck. It could be a big doe, but I try to find the biggest track in that food plot, and then I walk backwards. I track that deer backwards to where it came from. And sometimes you go all the way back to find a bed, and sometimes you hit the property line first and that deer kind of came from a different area. But I will track that deer back to its bed or back to the property line, whichever one comes first. And that'll give you a pretty good idea as to how that deer is using the landscape. How does that individual deer, and if it was a buck, how is that buck using your property to get from point A to point B? And what you can do when you either find his bed or you track him to the property line is you can just turn around and walk that same trail back to your food plot. And again, that's going to tell you a lot about how that deer prefers to move through your property, whether it's how he uses the terrain, how he uses your trails, how he uses certain edges. And you can oftentimes tell how fast he's moving through your property as well by looking at the spacing of the tracks. If the tracks are really tight, really close together, that means that that deer was most likely walking slower. That deer felt comfortable where he was. But maybe if that deer got to maybe an open hardwood setting, he feels a little bit more exposed, you might see those tracks spaced out a little bit more. That deer's picking up the pace. He doesn't want to be exposed like that. He's going to walk a little faster until he can get to the next section of denser cover. That's sometimes what you notice when you actually are tracking these larger tracks, individual bucks, through your property. And with this example, just looking at the spacing of the deer's tracks as he's moving through our property, we can use that information to improve our property. If we do notice that the deer's spacing is getting further apart, meaning he's picking up the pace a little bit, and we say, hey, this is an open hardwood setting, put 2 and 2 together, he's probably feeling exposed. Well, let's thicken this area up. Let's drop a few trees down, get more sunlight to the forest floor. So over time, it does thicken up, and the deer that are taking this path, they slow down and they spend more time on our property. Another thing that I really like doing this time of year when scouting my property is evaluating the deer trails that I'm trying to promote, whether those are man-made trails or they're natural trails that we're trying to strengthen. Just to give you guys an example, this is a deer trail that we're trying to promote on our property. And this is a man-made trail, so this trail did not exist before we purchased the property. And so I want to take the time this season, right now, post-season, to scout this area to see, are these deer using this trail? Are they using the trail as I've intended them to? And I'm not sure if you can see it well with the camera focused on me, but the deer are absolutely using this path. And this is just movement from the past several days. And what we're trying to do here is connect a bedding area off in that direction and have the deer work down this path, hit a mock scrape, and then head out to a smaller food source. And you want to make sure that you're evaluating the improvements on your property to make sure that the deer are using them as you've intended. For example, if I did not see any tracks along this trail, I would have to try to figure out why are these deer not using the path that I made to connect bedding to the food source. Is there something blocking the trail? Did I have a tree come down that's completely blocking it and they're going around it and I need to open it back up? Or is there another reason? Is there not really a point A and a point B, so there's not really a reason for these deer to take this path? Try to figure out the reason why if you're noticing that they're not doing what you want them to do. Another one of my habitat improvements that I'm scouting a lot this time of year, evaluating, would be my bedding areas. You can see exactly how those deer like to move through those bedding areas, and they sometimes will tell you if there's a new entrance or a new exit that they would prefer to have. So if you have a couple trees that are kind of laying on the ground and those deer are always jumping over that one section of cover, they're telling you that they would kind of like to go that way. And so just open that up with a chainsaw once things start to thaw out a little bit and give it to them. They're clearly telling you that they want to go that direction. And you can also see, do they feel comfortable in here? Are there certain areas of your bedding area that they're just not going into? Maybe that area is too tight and you need to open it up. But you can really get a lot of great information from scouting your property with some fresh snow on the ground. But guys, that's going to do it for today's video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Get outside, scout your property. There's no better time than right now. Please let us know if there's anything that we can do to help you change your property for good.